many people know the story of Josiah? Couple, yeah, some hands? Nice. I like the story. But before we get into that, that's my family. Something nice is that besides my brother, who's a giant, we're all about the same height, and then all the women are about the same height. Even Hope, and she's tiny. So, yeah. And out of my family, all the women serve in some role in their church. Including Hope, who does things around here. And then out of the men, everyone serves as a minister in some way, except for Ben, who's a recent convert, and then Luke, who's only just turned 20. So, yeah. So, I feel pretty blessed to have a family like this, where everyone's serving the Lord in a way, you know? My grandpa, and that's grandma, in Arkansas, he's an elder there. And he's been an elder for quite some time. And they're one of the churches that support Chris. So my grandpa's a good friend of Chris. And then recently, my dad has been asked to see if he's willing to take on the role of elder in upcoming years. Especially since we really want Stuart to retire. So that's pretty cool. So, yeah, a family that's willing to serve God wholeheartedly. And then two people who come from families who are non-Christian, but have then been brought into the church family because of the relationship that my family has. So it's really cool. And then these two little ones, they've recently upgraded from annoying the whole church to only annoying the rows around them. So that's a good sign. So always, seeing that growth, that's important. But, as blessed as I feel, not everyone has a family like this, And in my friend group in high school, of about 10 guys, 2 of us had parents that were still together. And then when I joined my baseball team later, I was the only one in our team that still had parents together. So it's sad. That's the world we live in. And especially in New Zealand, unfortunately, abuse in the families have been growing, and fights over lack of finances is causing people to split up. And yeah, it's tough being in a family that's broken, And so, as we talk about the story of Josiah, I want to remind everyone that God still loves people from broken families, and he can still do great things from people in broken families, and he invites people to share the church family, going out and finding people who are in broken families and inviting them into this family. So Josiah, at the age of 8, became king. His grandfather, Manasseh, was one of the most evil kings. And he's used some places in the Bible as an example of the most evil person you can think of. So that was his grandfather. And then he, Manasseh, was killed by Josiah's father, Ammon, who then became evil as well. Well, he was evil to begin with. He killed his father. But they brought in, let's worship as many idols as possible. Let's build altars everywhere. Let's forget the books of Moses. Just throw them in the back room somewhere. Neglect the temple. No longer celebrate festivals. So this is the kind of family that Josiah was born into, and then anointed a king at 8 years old, after both his father and his grandfather were both killed by the other leaders of Judah. This is what he's coming into, a family that relied on power and violence, and used their role incorrectly. They did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. But for some reason, even at the age of 8, Josiah decided to follow the ways of King David. And he was not going to do what was evil in the sight of the Lord, but he wanted to do what was right. And it's, he didn't use his broken family as a reason to drag him down. So I got the kings here. So here's Josiah, the last good king, and the last king to bring a revival in Judah. And you can see all the evil kings down here. So, there's his family, immediate family, that he ended up inheriting the kingdom after these two bad kings. And then you see also the 4 after him as well. They go back to evil ways. And there's a lot more people in the evil group than the good group, and the revival group, the greatest of the kings. And so this is what Josiah's in, He's got a history of a country that's just been ruled by bad kings, not many good examples, and the kingdom is just in shambles. But what's worse is that when he takes the throne, he does not have the law of Moses. It's currently non-existent in the king's court where it should be, because they're supposed to have the books of Moses memorized as a boy, and it's especially important for the king. But because of the 2 kings that came before Josiah, it's disappeared, and no one's reading it. So Josiah rules for 16 years as king, before he finally discovers the law of Moses, the books of Moses. So let's turn our Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 22. We'll start at the beginning. So 2 Kings 22. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and reigned for 31 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jedidiah, and the daughter of Adiah. She was from Bozkath. He did, Josiah, what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and walked in all the ways of his ancestor David. He did not turn to the left or to the right. In his 18th year as king, the king sent the court secretary Shaphan, son of Azaliah, son of Meshullam, to the Lord's temple, saying, "Go up to Hilkiah the high priest, so that he may total up the money brought into the Lord's temple. Put the money the doorkeepers have collected from the people. It is to be put into the hands of those doing the work, those who oversee the Lord's temple. They in turn are to give it to the workmen in the Lord's temple to repair the damage. They are to give it to the carpenters, the builders, the masons, to buy timber and quarried stone in order to repair the temple. No accounting is to be required from them, for their money put into their hands since they have started working with integrity." Now Hilkiah the high priest told Shaphan the court secretary, "I found the book of law in the Lord's temple. Remember, this is 18 years since Josiah has become king. And he gave the book to Shaphan to read it. Then Shaphan, I don't know if I'm saying that properly, sorry. The court secretary went to the king and reported, "Your servant has emptied out the money that was found in the temple and put it into the hands of those doing the work, those who oversee the Lord's temple." Then Shaphan, the court secretary, told the king, "Hilkiah the priest has given me a book," and Shaphan read it in the presence of the king. When the king heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his clothes. There you go. I could only find ripped men for some reason. But, I'm sure he's in good shape. He kept his protein up. When the king heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his clothes. He commanded Hilkiah the priest, he commanded Hilkiah the priest, Ahikam, son of Shaphan, Akbor, son of Milkiah, Shaphan the court secretary, and the king's servant Isaiah, "Go and inquire of the Lord for me, the people and all Judah about the instruction in this book that has been found. For great is the Lord's wrath that is kindled against us, because our ancestors have not obeyed the words of this book in order to do everything written about us." So he's been king for 18 years. He's trying to be a good king. He started rebuilding the Temple of Solomon. And he's trying to follow the King David. But 18 years after being king, he's 26 years old, and he discovers that the word of the Lord has been hidden away in this temple and not being read to him or to the people. And so they don't know fully that they're doing what they're doing wrong and how wrong it is. And most likely, scholars would agree that the part that caused Josiah to freak out the most was the covenant of blessings and cursings in Deuteronomy 28 and 29. The covenant of blessings is not too long, quite nice to read. To summarize it, it's health, victory, and favor from the Lord. But unfortunately, it's a lot smaller than the covenant of curses, which include reversal of blessing, disease and drought, defeat, deportation, reverse status, military siege, covenant termination, and exile. So Josiah has been king for 18 years now. He's trying his best. His family has been terrible, and he's trying to sort out things. And then he reads this. And he realizes that the kingdom is too far gone. Josiah's forefathers had doomed the kingdom. God's wrath is coming. What would you do in this situation where you realize there's nothing you can do to stop God's wrath from coming? You know? I was thinking about, what do I relate to as the most hopeless situation? And I'd have to say, in my first world problems, it would be probably the idea of buying a home, you know? It's so expensive, you need high income. Hope and I teased the idea by talking to a couple of mortgage brokers, and basically they all said, all right, double your income, save up for 10 years, and then come back to us. And it's like, well, thank you. One of them was trying to be a little bit hopeful, and they said, oh yeah, just bring your standards way down. We could probably get a plot of land out in the middle of nowhere. So, yeah, it feels hopeless. But now imagine that this hopelessness was brought on, which incurred wrath by God, and it happened before you were even alive. You know, what kind of hopelessness would you feel? Because the family that came before you didn't obey the covenant of God, and now God's promise of curses is coming. No wonder King Josiah tore off his clothes and wept. But this didn't stop him. Yeah, let's go there. Josiah decided to still be obedient to God, even in his situation. He wanted to help as many people come back to God as possible. He purged all the altars and idols to other gods. Let's read a little bit of that. 2 Chronicles 34. Second Chronicles 34, starting at verse 3. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, Josiah began to seek God of his ancestor David, and in the 12th year he began to cleanse Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, of the Asherah poles, the carved images, and the cast images. Then in the presence of the altars of Baal, in his presence, the altars of Baal were torn down. He chopped them down. He chopped down the incense altars that were above them. He shattered the Asherah poles, the carved images, the cast images. He crushed them to dust. He scattered them over the graves of those who were sacrificed to them. He burned the bones of the priests on their own altars. He cleansed Judah and Jerusalem. And he did the same in Manasseh, in Ephraim, in Simeon, all the way down to Naphtali and the surrounding mountain shrines. He tore down all the altars. He smashed all the Asherah poles, all the carved images. He crushed them to powder. He chopped down all the incense altars throughout the land, and he returned to Jerusalem. Destroyed them all. There's no other God. The God of wrath is coming, and he's going to cause curses upon this land, but we are going to destroy every other god in this place until that happens. We're going to bring as many people back as possible. And then he repaired Jehovah's temple, where priest Hilkiah found the book of the law. And he was good about it too. We read that we're not going to keep track of money. This is how much money we've raised to repair the temple. Here, to the people working on it, have it. We're not going to keep track of it. It's going to go to you guys, and we want you guys to do a good job. Repairing the temple. Everyone, lots of people got involved. And it was important to Josiah to create this place where God can dwell. And then we had, the last one, the greatest Passover ever. 30,000 lambs and goats provided as Passover offerings. Can you even imagine that number? 30,000? Look at all those dots in the back. They're all sheep and goats. Probably. But it's just an unfathomable number. And estimates say it was 500,000 people in Jerusalem to celebrate this Passover. The greatest Passover that ever happened, according to 2 Chronicles 35, and no Passover has been bigger since. All of this was done in an attempt to bring people back to God, to redeem Judea, even though curses are coming. Josiah could have read that God's wrath is coming and given up, followed his father's way, just does whatever he wants, but he didn't. He decided to be obedient to God, even in a hopeless situation, even when God's wrath is coming. God has promised to destroy everything, and he still trusts that he can be obedient to this God. Try and bring as many people back to worshiping him as possible. Not giving up. Josiah obeyed God even in a devastating situation. And even when it seemed pointless, still decided to obey God. Let's read Huldola's prophecy in 2 Chronicles 34. Huldah the priestess, she said to them, "This is what Yahweh, the God of Israel, says to the man who sent you to me. This is what Yahweh says. I am about to bring disaster on this place and its inhabitants, fulfilling all the curses written in the book that they read in the presence of the king of Judah. Because they have abandoned me and burned incense to other gods to provoke me with all the works of their hands, my wrath will be poured out on this place. It will not be quenched. Say this to the king of Judah, who sent you to ask of Yahweh. This is what the Lord says, the God of Israel. As for the words you heard, because your heart was tender and you humbled yourself before God when you heard his words against this place and against its inhabitants, because you humbled yourself before me, you tore your clothes and wept, I, the Lord, have heard you. And this is the Lord's declaration. I will indeed gather you to your fathers, and you will be gathered to your grave in peace. Your eyes will not see the disaster that I am bringing on this place or its inhabitants." And they reported this to the king. Do we help people even if they choose not to believe in God? When does our obedience stop? Is it when it's inconvenient? Is it when we assume it's pointless or hopeless? Or maybe it's because someone else ruined it for us? Does God want us to have this selective obedience? Josiah didn't. Even when the kingdom was doomed, Josiah decided to be obedient. And this paused God's wrath. And I think that's incredible. Josiah knew that because of his fathers, the kingdom was doomed. And even his son, Jehoahaz, who became king after Josiah tried to defend the land from Egypt, he immediately turned back to his evil ways and worshipped false gods. Josiah didn't falter, even though the past was all evil, the future's looking evil. He decided not to break away from obeying God. He didn't use his family as an excuse. He didn't use his circumstances as an excuse. But he did everything he could to bring people back to God, back to worshipping the only God, the God that gave them that land. How do we feel about the families who live here in Taronga? You know, with them all worshipping their own lives, or they're divorcing their spouses because they want to better themselves only, or they're abandoning kids. How do we feel about those people that are here in Taronga? Is their hopeless situation and their broken families mean that we just don't worry about them? That we just do our best in our little corner? Or should we be standing firm for God when we need to, and being that gentle voice when we need to the families that need a better family to be welcomed into? Are we going to be a light that pauses God's wrath on those who don't worship him? Or are we just going to let the world continue as it is? No matter how hopeless we feel, no matter the people we meet and how far gone they look, or how broken and low they seem, we want to be a people that brings light and brings family into the lives of those who need it. We want to be a church that welcomes all people. We want to be a church that doesn't make excuses saying that, they won't listen, or, they're focused on other things. We want to be that person who's in the lives of our community, welcoming people into this family of God, and pausing the wrath that comes from not knowing God, from not obeying his commandments. We want to be a church that sees the brokenness and offers healing. Do you think we can do that? Because it's tough. We're lucky enough not to be a king or someone in power with a much higher role of responsibility from God, but we still have a responsibility from God to impact our families, to impact our communities, and to bring people to worship God. No matter how long it takes, no matter how helpless it seems, no matter how exhausted you are, we've only got one life to bring people to God. So let's be like Josiah, and even though wrath is coming and this world is going to be destroyed, we're going to bring as many people as we can, inside or outside our family, no matter what our family thinks of us. We're going to bring people to God in the hope that God sees favor in us as well. So let's pray.